The Golden Age of Pirates, an era famous for its swashbuckling rebellious scalawags spanning the 1650s through the 1730s, saw some of history's greatest anti-heroes steal vast quantities of bountiful treasure. Here are some of the greatest pirates of the Caribbean and their incredible stories. Number 5. William Kidd. Perhaps the least successful pirate of the bunch, William Kidd nevertheless gained his place in infamy sailing the waters of the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. Kidd likely served as a seaman's apprentice in the 1680s before becoming a member of a pirate crew under infamous Captain Jean Fantin in 1689. The young Kidd soon took part in a mutiny that removed the captain from power and placed Kidd in command of the ship. From here they sailed to the island of Nevis, renaming their ship the Blessed William. They were enlisted by Christopher Codrington to assist in defending the island from the French Navy. Despite not taking any prize ships, Kidd and his crew managed to ransack the French island of Marie Galante, destroying the town and looting over 2,000 pounds sterling. From here, Kidd and his crew would sail about the Atlantic, attempting, somewhat unsuccessfully, to make their fortune capturing treasure-laden vessels. They managed to sink one ship off the coast of New England in the form of a privateer in the meantime. The crew soon found themselves stranded after Captain Robert Culliford stole their ship while ashore in Antigua. After returning to New York, Kidd was asked by Richard Coote, 1st Earl of Belmont, Governor of Massachusetts, to attack and kill or capture Thomas Tow, John Ireland, and any other pirates that he may find. For this purpose, Kidd set out from London aboard a new ship, the powerful Adventure Galley, equipped with 34 guns and oars to move when the wind was slack. On their way down the Thames, Adventure Galley failed to salute a Royal Navy yacht. As a result, Adventure Galley was stopped and many of her crew were press-ganged into Royal Navy service aboard the yacht. Captain Kidd was able to gather more men in New York, but lost a further third of them to cholera in the Comoros Islands, heavily depleting his crew. The Adventure Galley struggled to find any prizes, and Kidd soon earned the ire of his crew when he refused to attack Dutch and colonial ships that fell outside the realm of his commission. At one point, an argument between Kidd and a gunner, William Moore, resulted in Kidd dropping an iron-bound bucket on the man's head, killing him. The largest prize of William Kidd's career came in the form of the Quade Merchant, an Indian ship under Armenian employ that transported gold, silver, satins, and mulsons off the coast of India. Kidd took French passes from the boat, proving it was a valid target. Still, despite this, he was branded a pirate back home as Indian ships were not a threat to the British. William Kidd would lose all but 13 of his men, who abandoned him for Culliford, the pirate who had stolen Kidd's original ship. He returned to New York after burning the leaky Adventure prize and hiding some of his treasure on Gardiner's Island as insurance for his safety. He attempted to meet Belmont on Long Island, but was instead invited to Boston to negotiate his surrender. Instead of the pardon he had anticipated, Kidd was thrown in Stone Prison, one of the worst prisons of its time. The English statesmen who had financially supported his excursion were primarily Whigs. To vilify the Whigs, the Tory ministry had labeled Kidd a pirate and attempted to use that distinction to alienate them. As a result, the aristocrats who had seemingly wholeheartedly supported him on his departure now vied for his execution. He was eventually convicted of piracy and hanged, the documents that solidified the Quade Merchant as a viable target having been intentionally lost before his trial so as to not be used for his acquittal. The first rope used to perform his execution snapped, momentarily saving his life. However, despite cries of divine intervention by the crowd, he was soon hanged for a second time, putting an end to Captain Kidd. Number 4. Henry Every. Known by many as the King of the Pirates, Henry Every made his name by capturing over a dozen vessels between 1694 and 1696. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Every was never caught, which means that he actually enjoyed the spoils of his endeavors. Every began his sailing career in the Royal Navy. While aboard the 90-gun HMS Albemarle, he fought in several battles, including the Battle of Beachy Head, and he helped to capture a French convoy off the coast of Brest. Every began his pirating career aboard the slave ship Charles II. After becoming discontent due to lack of pay and failing to receive his letter of marque from Spain, the crew of Charles II mutinied, naming Every captain. The new crew renamed their ship Fancy before putting their loyal crewmates ashore and setting out on their piratical endeavor. The Fancy sailed to the Indian Ocean, taking their first prizes in the form of several English merchant ships off the coast of Maya. Henry Every's most famous raid occurred on September 7, 1695. After joining forces with several other pirate vessels, Every and his crew attacked a 25-ship convoy of Grand Mughal vessels bound for pilgrimage to Mecca. The fleet included the 80-gun treasure ship Ganji Sawai, defended by the 90-gun escort Fateh Muhammad. In a brilliant display of tactics, Evri and his men boarded the Ganji Sawai, where they battled Mughal soldiers for between 2 and 3 hours. At the end of the battle, the Sawai belonged to the pirates, along with the treasure worth £600,000, or $145 million in today's currency. This made it the largest prize ever taken by a pirate. This attack on Mughal shipping soured relations between England and the Mughals. As a result, the Privy Council of England and the Dutch East India Trading Company put a £1,000 bounty on Evri's head, making Evri the first ever subject of a worldwide manhunt. Henry Evri and his crew would go on to capture a total of roughly a dozen ships, amassing significant wealth during their journeys. Through the ensuing years, many of Evri's contemporaries and former crewmates were eventually killed or captured and executed. For his part, however, Henry Evri would disappear without a trace sometime during 1696. His whereabouts after that remain unknown, but it is believed that he lived as a free man until his death, which probably occurred in the late 1710s. Number 3. Blackbeard. Edward Teach, or Thatch, commonly known as Blackbeard, is believed to have begun serving aboard privateering ships sometime during Queen Anne's War. He eventually settled on the island of New Providence before joining the crew of the famous pirate Benjamin Hornigold in 1716. Teach was quickly promoted to captain of one of the sloops in Hornigold's small fleet of pirate ships. His fleet was soon supplemented by 2 more ships, one of which was commanded by Teach took command of Bonnet's ship, Revenge, giving Bonnet his older, smaller sloop. The merry gang of pirates raided ships across the Caribbean and as far north as the Carolinas. However, as an Old English privateer, Hornigold refused to attack English ships, creating animosity between himself and his crew, and eventually leading to his ousting as captain toward the end of 1717. He took 2 of the 4 vessels in the fleet with him when he left. For his part, Blackbeard took the French slaver Concorde on November 28, 1717, renaming her Queen Anne's Revenge and equipping her with 40 cannons and over 300 crew. Blackbeard gave the Concorde's former crew the smaller of his 2 sloops to sail home on, before taking the Jamaican logboard cutter Adventure and enlisting her crew along with 4 sloops to his fleet in the Bay of Honduras. After burning the merchant ship Protestant Caesar due to her connection to Boston, where many pirates had recently been hanged, Blackbeard and his fleet blockaded Charleston, South Carolina, holding the town ransom in May of 1718. The pirates attacked and looted 8 ships attempting to gain access to the harbor, capturing the ship Crowley and imprisoning a member of the provincial council who had been aboard her. The pirates primarily desired supplies, particularly medicine, and thus sent 2 of their men along with a local into Charleston to gather the supplies that they had ransomed for. However, when the men had not returned after the 2 days allotted by Blackbeard, he became agitated and began to plan an attack on the town itself. He called off the attack after sailing into Charleston Harbor only to find that his men had been given the requested materials but had decided to drink and fraternize with locals instead of bringing them back to the ship. The pirate gang eventually attempted to careen their vessels off the coast of Beaufort, North Carolina. This process involved beaching their ships to gain access to the hull to pry away sea growth and make repairs. During this process, Queen Anne's Revenge ran aground and was destroyed. Blackbeard's second largest ship, one of his sloops, was also destroyed, trying to tow the Revenge free. Stede Bonnet, one of Blackbeard's captains, chose to surrender to the English in return for a pardon. While he was away, Blackbeard stole anything valuable from his ship and marooned his crew. Bonnet unfortunately returned to piracy shortly thereafter, but was caught and executed the same year. Blackbeard settled in Bath, North Carolina, after receiving a pardon from the provincial governor. The life of a landlubber didn't serve him, however, and he was soon back to his old ways, drawing the attention of Alexander Spotswood, the governor of Virginia, who sent 2 ships to eliminate him. These 2 ships, Ranger and Jane, caught Teach and his crew moored near Ocracoke Island. Over half of Blackbeard's crew was ashore, leaving him with 19 men. Thinking quickly, Blackbeard cut his mooring lines and turned his ship, unleashing broadsides that killed or injured nearly half of the British seamen. The Ranger was damaged so severely that she was forced to retreat. Jane, on the other hand, proceeded with its attack. Blackbeard and his men boarded the seemingly lightly defended ship. However, most of the British had been sequestered below decks by Robert Maynard, commander of the expedition, before the battle had begun. These men emerged and engaged Blackbeard's forces when the pirates boarded the Jane. Blackbeard was separated from his men and fought doggedly until the end. According to Maynard, he personally counted 5 gunshot wounds and 20 saber slashes on Blackbeard's ravaged body once the beastly pirate finally succumbed to his injuries. Blackbeard captured roughly 30 ships during his career, making him one of the most successful pirates of the Caribbean by number of ships captured. Number 2. Black Sam Bellamy. Black Sam may not have been as well known as famous pirate figures such as Blackbeard and Henry Morgan. Still, with 53 ships captured, he was easily one of the most successful pirates of the Golden Era. Nicknamed Black Sam because he refused to wear a wig over his long jet black hair, Sam Bellamy began his sailing career in the Royal Navy, fighting in several battles during his later teens. After a stint living on Cape Cod, Bellamy left for the Florida Keys as part of a crew of men who intended to salvage treasure left from the wrecked treasure fleet of 1715. The men saw little success in this endeavor, eventually joining the crew of Benjamin Hornigold, who commanded a small fleet alongside his then first mate, Edward Teach. After Hornigold was deposed, the 90 men aboard Black Sam's ship elected to remain with him as their captain. The men attacked and captured the ship Sultana, with Bellamy taking her as his new flagship. He gave command of his old boat, Mary Ann, to his best friend, Palsgrave Williams. Bellamy's greatest capture came in the spring of 1717, when he took the Whydah galley in the Windward Passage between Hispaniola and Cuba. The galley was a brand new slaver loaded with gold and precious materials on its way home from delivering slaves to the American continent. Bellamy gave the crew of the Whydah his ship, taking the galley as his new flagship and upgrading her armament to 28 guns. He and his crew then sailed northward, capturing more ships. They neared Cape Cod 2 months later when William split from Bellamy so that he could go and visit his family in Rhode Island. Bellamy, for his part, stayed near Cape Cod. It is believed that he intended to see his wife in the area, but would never get the chance. On the night of April 26, 1717, Bellamy and the Whydah were swept up in a massive nor'easter and drawn into nearby shoals. At 15 minutes past midnight, the ship's mast snapped, dragging the vessel over and killing Bellamy and 144 of his 146 men. Nearby, the storm also sunk one of his sloops, with only 7 survivors. Of the 9 men who survived the storm, 7 were executed for piracy shortly thereafter. Number 1. Black Bart. Bartholomew Roberts, better known as Black Bart, was the most successful Caribbean pirate as measured by number of ships captured. He and his crew took over 400 boats during their reign of terror. Born John Roberts, Bartholomew Roberts began his sailing career at 13 in 1695. Little evidence suggests his whereabouts until 1718, when he was the second mate of a slave ship off the coast of West Africa. His ship was captured by Howell Davis, who was in command of the ships Royal James and Royal Rover. Roberts was conscripted into Davis's crew, where he quickly earned a place as a navigator due to his prowess and that expertise. Davis landed at Principe, inviting the island governor to board the ship under false colors, where they intended to capture and ransom him. The governor of the island saw right through their ruse, instead ambushing Davis and executing him and his crew ashore. The Royal Rover's crew held a vote and elected Roberts captain, an astonishing choice considering that he had only been conscripted to the crew weeks before. Black Bart led his crew back to Principe, where they took control of most of the island, killing many of its male inhabitants in the process. Next, the ship embarked on raids, sinking and capturing boats across the Atlantic. They eventually reached Todos os Santos Bay, where 42 ships were moored. Roberts captured one of the ships, asking its captain to point out the most valuable cargo in the fleet. The sailor directed him to the 40-gun Sagrada Familia, which the pirates quickly captured, taking about 40,000 gold medallas and valuable jewelry made for the King of Portugal. Roberts eventually found himself using a captured sloop to chase a brigantine off the coast of Devil's Island. However, upon returning to where he had left the Royal Rover, he found that his first mate, Walter Kennedy, had stolen the ship and most of his loot. Despite losing most of his firepower with Rover, Roberts captured the harbor of Fairyland along with about a dozen ships. The harbor of Trepassy followed, and roughly 22 ships therein. At Trepassy, Roberts took a ship as a replacement for Royal Rover before burning and sinking the rest of his fleet. Shortly after, he took a 26-gun French warship, renaming her Royal Fortune. Next, he captured a fleet at anchor at St. Christopher's Island, ransoming the ships and burning one that failed to pay the ransom along with their cargo of slaves. Roberts continued to capture ships as far north as Newfoundland, as far south as Brazil, and west along the coasts of Africa. He was careening his ships along the coast of what is now Gabon when he was spotted by a British fifth-rate ship of the line, HMS Swallow, on February 5, 1722. Roberts sent his sloop Ranger to attack the British boat, believing her to be a cargo vessel. Once out of hearing range of Roberts, the Swallow lowered her gun ports and engaged Ranger, forcing her capture after a prolonged battle. The next day, Swallow returned to Cape Lopez to find Roberts and Royal Fortune were still there, having just captured another ship. The men of Roberts' crew were drunk after their capture, inhibiting their ability to fight. Fortune had to sail past the British vessel to reach open water, necessitating her to take a broadside from the British ship. However, the helmsman of Royal Fortune missteered the boat, causing her to catch a second broadside from the Swallow. Roberts was hit in the neck and killed instantaneously by grape shot from the British vessel. Fortune survived another 2 hours, but was dogged into surrender along with 272 crew. Most of the men were either executed or signed indentures with the Royal African Company, a fate most considered worse than death.